Always Another Game podcast is back, and this one has been a while in the making. This guest and I have been playing a little bit of tennis to get this booked in, but it's going to be worth it because when this guest today reached out to me initially, there was a huge connection in values on his personal values in life, his story, and what we're trying to achieve here through the Always Another Game podcast. So with me today, I have Kent Bray. Kent, how's it going?
Very good, Shaun. Lovely to finally get this podcast underway.
There is zero pressure that we've waited so long to do this, that this is now going to be a fantastic episode. So stay relaxed, Kent.
Mate, I will. I'm looking forward to it. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Brilliant. So just a quick little bit about Kent. We've connected, again, like most of my guests, through LinkedIn and through a referral, actually. Had a quick back look through our message. So thank you to my referral on that one. But Kent is a counsellor, a mentor, and a motivational speaker. But this is all formed from his previous career in rugby, where he was a player and coach for the Harlequins, amongst a number of other things. But ultimately, a big part of what we're going to be talking about today is how he overcame cocaine addiction within that time of playing sports. So just a trigger warning for anybody early on. If anybody has been going through that and needs to switch off, that is absolutely fine. But again, it may be worthwhile sitting in and hear how Kent has come about that and how he's overcome it to do what he's doing today. So what I love the audience to know right from the get-go is, who is Kent Bray?
Okay, so obviously I'm an Australian. I'm 60 years old. I've lived half my life in England. I've had 30 years in England. I came across here to play rugby. But I am the father of two kids who I love with all my heart. They are 15 and 12. I fell into this counselling and mentoring space. I was a guy who ended up being director of a bank at Canary Wharf, Citibank. I was the director of the bank. I was a foreign exchange trader, and I was in the world of prestige and status, money, me, more. I got addicted to cocaine. I'm 8.5 years clean and sober today. And during that journey of the last 8.5 years, I had a revelation that I had been in the taking game for a large proportion of my life. I don't think that I'm a selfish person, but when I look back over my life, it was just all about what I wanted to achieve, what I wanted to do. And I had a revelation and a spiritual awakening that I wanted to help people. So I went and studied for 2.5 years, became a therapeutic counsellor, jumped on LinkedIn, where you and I met, and put myself out there, just exposed my vulnerabilities and my defects of character, and said, yep, used to be a cocaine addict. I'm not today, and I want to help. Thought I was going to be an addiction counsellor, but the universal energy has led me into the world of mentoring. A lot of young men, 20s, 30s, 40s, have reached out to me, and largely their lives are okay, but, married, kids, successful job, but there's something not quite right, and they can't find the right person to speak to, and they are finding me. And Shaun, I've got to say, from the bottom of my heart, it is the most fulfilling vocation I've ever had in my life, albeit, I earned a lot more money in the city, but I'm a lot better version of myself today. And it's been an amazing journey. I am the sum of all of my experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So very, very grateful to be alive. Very, very grateful to be of service to others. That's me.
Yeah. And that's a big part of it. I know it's not quite the same, but when I played ice hockey, as a professional player, even when I played semi-professional, I felt like I was being professional at that time, with how I handled myself and my workouts. Yeah, I feel fitter and healthier now than I did then. So, the fact that you said you had all this money and all this success, but that wasn't what success actually was. It's good to let people know that there is more and there is other ways. When we're stuck in one, we don't have to stay in that place. But one bit particularly stood out to me there when you were kind of putting through the intro, and you said it was always what I wanted. Where did that come from? Was that created? Was that something you were raised with?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think there's two parts to it. My father had a very, very loving, nurturing mother, and my father was really, really well-intentioned, but he was old school. So I was a bit, you've got to work hard. And he never overly praised me. He was, I had people say to me, oh, your father's very proud of you. When I was, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, whatever. And I used to think, but he's never told me. So I think there was a drive in me to please my father and please my mother, but also inside me was a very, very competitive drive. I was a very, very shy child, up until about 6, 7 or 8. And then I found sport. And when I found sport, I was good at sport, all sports. Confidence came, got a lot of friends. And I think my first addiction was adulation. And I think that me, I had a ferocious drive around relentless standards. So no matter what I did, I had to be successful at it. And I think it was a mixture of something in my DNA, but also a drive to please my father. Yeah, that's where the drive came from, I believe.
Yeah, and that's come up a couple of times when I've had episodes where we've discussed with former athletes about addiction, and parenting has come up a bit, and also not necessarily always in a bad way, just a way of old school parenting, and again, not saying you're proud, not giving the accolation that you need. At that time when you were pushing so hard, were you proud of yourself, or is that why you just kept pushing because you kind of didn't get that fulfillment?
Yeah, I did. No. I was fulfilled in a sense of, I would, when I look back, I loved getting man of the match. I loved getting player of the year. And there's a theme in my life, Shaun, that no matter what I did, so with education, I left school and did a law degree. And then between my law degree and my rugby, I got into Oxford University. I had a year at Oxford University doing postgrad studies. I'm an Oxford Blue. So I absolutely rinsed my education. I went to one of the greatest universities in the world. With my rugby, I played Australian under-21s, I played for Queensland, I played for New South Wales, played for Oxford, played for Harlequins. I did everything bar play international rugby as a senior, played international rugby as under-21s. And with my work career, I ended up director of a bank. I started, as a junior and a foreign exchange trader. So there was always this drive. I think where I'm going to with this, I wanted more. I always wanted more. Yeah, I was happy with what I'd achieved, but it was like, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? And I think ultimately I ran out of steam. Late 40s, up in the city, I was running out of steam, and I started looking for a coping mechanism, which we'll get into a bit later with the cocaine. But I was proud of what I was doing. I was proud with what I'd achieved in all areas of my life, but I wasn't fulfilled. Ultimately, when I look back now, I kept going for more and more and more and more, and realised that I was never, ever going to get ultimately fulfilled. I was left, actually, when I sat in rehab, I was actually empty. So there was a lot of processing, a lot of unpacking that had to be done about my life.
Yeah. Well, to understand the story a little bit more, was it always rugby for you? Is that where it all started and stayed? How did it all start for you, sport?
So all sports, and I don't say this for ego, I just say it's fact. Whether it was cricket, like I went to a boarding school, a secondary school. I've got to thank my mum and dad so much that they put just about every dollar they had into putting me and my two brothers into a private school at secondary school. And I thrived with the expectations around school and sport. I thrived. It brought the best out of me. It brought that competitive spirit. But I ran for the school, swam for the school. So in my last couple of years at Rockhampton Grammar School in central Queensland, I played first 15 rugby for 2 years, first 11 cricket, first 11 football, ran for the school, swam for the school. I was captain of sport for the school. But the always oscillated towards team sports, and between the team sports, the one that came out on top, the one that that absolutely amped me up, that I got a great deal of euphoria and excitement around was rugby. So it was the one of many. So when I left school, I thought, right, this is it. I'm going to throw, as far as my sporting direction goes, rugby's going to be it.
Yeah, I think it comes up again quite a lot. Cross playing sport as a kid is essential. Do not get in too early. There's different unique skills that you can learn, that even if you love playing football, rugby gives you something that will assist your football ability that you may not see if you don't play it. And again, you just never know what you fall into it. So, I was the same, multiple sports, but it got to a point where my parents were like, look, you're getting somewhere in ice hockey, you're playing at these levels, you've got to make a choice now. What was it? And I loved ice hockey the most. It was the thing. What was it about rugby for you that you knew that was the one?
I was skillful. I was just a very, very skillful player. Could kick both feet, great hands, and and as I said, I've got to be careful with the ego here, but it was that I love with team sports. I love the mateship. I love the banter. I love the fact that I could get physically challenged. I love the mental side of it. And just something you said there was, when you find something that you're good at, I found it euphoric. I found the feeling very liberating, very freeing. When I was on a rugby field, I felt totally at peace, and it was a way of me just to express myself. So when I went out onto a rugby field, I just felt at home, and it just, to some extent, a lot of it came quite easily to me. So it was just a good fit. But I loved everything about it. I loved the physical. When I say the physical confrontation, I played in the backs, so I wasn't looking for that physical confrontation as such. But I loved the way that I could challenge myself physically. I used to go to the gym all the time, swim all the time, took pride in my body. It was just, I suppose it was just a way of me being validated, being seen, being heard, and also the adulation that came with it was intoxicating. So the more representative teams I played, the more that I got affirmed. I just wanted more of it. I think it was like a drug in itself.
Yeah, and I love what you said there about the bigger package. I think a lot of people don't always realize that is, a lot of players, and this isn't just professional level, do take it seriously, and I just remember for a long period of time, especially before kids, every waking day was like, right, training tonight, gym later, got a game at the weekend, got to think about my food, my sleep, my water. Everything was built around performing at the weekend. So it's quite, it wasn't overwhelming at the time, but when I think about it now, I was like, God, how did I do that? How did I live my life just focused on a sport? Because I don't even really think, I think about it on a Wednesday because I coach tonight on the time we're recording. But other than that, I don't think about ice hockey. So it's funny how you can go from one extreme to another. Was it the rugby that brought you over here, or was it work that brought you over here?
Okay, so I left school, I became a lawyer, right? And look, the reason I became a lawyer was, I now look back and process it, I wanted to please my parents. I was the youngest of three boys. I had a brother, Scott, who died when he was 18. I was only 16. He had a blood disorder, and from diagnosis to death was 3 months. My oldest brother, Mark, was a lawyer, and with my parents, I think, I wanted to repay them. So I became a lawyer. I hated it. I didn't like it. I didn't like studying it. I didn't like practicing it. I then went to Oxford University for a year. Post-Oxford University, I realised I wasn't going to play for the full Australian national team, and I wasn't a lawyer anymore. So I thought, what am I going to do? A very good friend of mine, Troy Coker, was playing at Harlequins. He said, come across here. You'll get in this team. They're very well connected in the city. So I came across, and yes, in answer to your question, I joined Harlequins with a view to have the overseas experience, live overseas and have that cultural experience. I tried to get into Italy to join a rugby club there, but they had very restrictive. You're only allowed a couple of overseas players, and I couldn't get in anywhere. So I came over here, joined Harlequins, and from that, I got a job in the city. So 1991, I came here to play for Quins. And that's how it all eventuated.
So was it only a temporary plan? You weren't planning to stay here forever?
Sure, mate. I thought I'll have a year or two here, see how it goes, and then we'll see what happens. I got a job, and I was in 19. So I joined Harlequins in 1991. I was working for a money broking company for 4 years, RP Martins, and that was going really, really well. And then I joined Citibank and stayed at Citibank for 18 years. But in the early 90s, I'm in London. I don't know if you remember, but the early 90s in London was fantastic. There was I mean, I don't know how old you are, actually. You might not remember.
I was only a tot then, yeah.
I was going to say, I just realised halfway through that you are a lot younger than me. But seriously, England was just the music industry, the food industry. There was plenty of money around. And I was playing for Harlequins, which was amateur, but I was getting paid. Mate, there's a point in the early 90s where I was like with basics and bonuses, I was on like £100,000. You know what I mean? Work. Playing for Harlequins. Harlequins was full of England internationals. Household names like Brian Moore, Jason Leonard, Peter Winterbottom, Will Carling, Simon Halliday, Mickey Skinner, David Pears, Andy Harriman, etc., etc. So I'm playing for this well-known rugby team, full of England internationals that were recognised. We're hanging out in southwest London, and I'm getting paid this money for a job that I'm finding quite easy. And I thought to myself, this is like travelling all around the world playing rugby. And I thought, this is great. I had this stunning girlfriend who worked for Harper's and Queen magazine, very sort of prestige and status. Mate, I'm a kid from Rockhampton in Queensland, so I'm thinking this is sensational. And so I stayed for a few years, and then after a number of years, girlfriend and I had children, and at that point everything changed. So it was always going to be for a year for one reason, or it initially was going to be for a year or two, see how it goes. But Shaun, mate, one thing about life is you just don't know, what's around the corner and how it's going to pan out. 30 years later, mate, I'm still here.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. There's been multiple athletes have said, yeah, go and try the European or the world experience and play in different places. And some come back and some stay, and and you just never know where it will lead you to go. But again, it's the experience. I was close a couple of times. It never really worked out for me. I think possibly it was more a financial situation. Ice hockey is an expensive sport, so then to go and put that into another country where I was looking at Finland at one point, couldn't speak Finnish, wouldn't have been able to work. But a lot of people have said, yeah, it's the best thing they ever did was go and try and play your sport in a different country.
Yeah, the cultural experience. The thing was, I was based in England, but back in that day, there was a lot of 7-a-side rugby and 10-a-side rugby, and I was playing rugby, going all around the world playing rugby. So I was in all sorts of countries, and that was just, very, very enlightening and very, very open, opening up my mind. The cultural experiences were brilliant, as you rightly said. That playing overseas, and back then there's very few overseas players, so overseas players were a bit of a novelty, and I was one. So I enjoyed that being, possibly, dare I say, it's a bit special, a little bit different. It's just an amazing experience. When I look back on those 90s, I was travelling, with Sicily playing sevens, Portugal, Spain, Kenya, Malaysia, Singapore, England, Ireland, Wales, France, etc. It was just a great South Africa. It was brilliant. Great memories, great times. Yeah. Very thankful.
And obviously these great times came with some challenges. You're very open about the cocaine addiction. It's something that you speak of and aim to help many others. And I see, 3 potential problem areas here. Obviously, we were in this sporting environment where, it can occur. We've got, this being in the banking industry, this, lots of money, but also I know a lot, speaking to other people that have suffered about this era, this environment of being in London. where did the problems start for you?
Okay, so I think this is very interesting because I can thread this in with the rugby, leaving rugby. So if we just backtrack a little bit, I spoke about adulation and being euphoric, right? So when I leave the rugby world, I know that I'm not going to have that level of euphoria and working in that team environment. And all of a sudden, I felt there was a bit of a void. Now, a lot of that void got filled when I started to work at Citibank as a foreign exchange trader, because it was me versus the market. So those competitive juices were still being played out because it's me versus the market. We had about 20 traders on a lot of that. It sort of mirrored a lot of what I experienced in rugby. I worked in a team. The competitive stuff was me versus the markets, but I still had that more going on. So I wanted more wealth. I wanted more. I bought a number of properties, and it was this more, and I kept going. When I got to my late 40s, I was starting to run out of steam, and I knew it. And I think that the relentless standards that I had adhered to for decades I told you about, like getting a law degree, going to Oxford, absolutely rinsing my rugby career, leaving no stone unturned to be the best I could be, coming over to Harlequins, having all those experiences, traveling the world. Then I'm in the city, and it was just like more and more and more and more. And I think it was unsustainable. And I think the cocaine, when it came in, it started out as social. So, interestingly enough, a businessman at Harlequins, who's a good friend today, said to me one day, "Would you like a line of cocaine?" And I said, "Yes," because I'm a bit of a risker. This was something I worked out when I had my therapist, was that I was happy to go overseas. I was happy to throw in my law degree and do something else. I was happy to start a job in London I didn't really know anything about. I'm a risker. So I had tried recreational drugs before, but nothing, very minimal amounts, not really for me. I'm not a drug guy. So my script is that I'm not into drugs. Drugs is not me. I look after my body, look after my mind. I want to be the best I can, and drugs is not a part of that. But I started to lean, so I started socially, I enjoyed it, and then it definitely became a coping mechanism. So the coping mechanism was that I was in a country I was done with. I wanted to go home. I was cooked from the job. 22 years in the city had taken its toll. I was in a relationship I wanted to get out of. That was with the mother of my children. And I lent into cocaine as a coping mechanism. So if I could speak to the audience now, I would say, be aware. So have an awareness that if you're starting to lean into alcohol a bit or starting to lean into drug a bit, ask why. Like, why is the need? Why is this need? Why is this need for this support? Appears to be support. It's a coping mechanism. Then, of course, Shaun, it goes like this. There's abstinence. Then there's using. There's heavy using. And then there's addiction. Mate, addiction is a completely... it's a world of its own. And what happened was, very briefly, in the end, and I will talk very specifically about the amounts because I want people who are out there who are struggling to identify and relate that, this is where it took me. So I was doing 20 to 30 grams of cocaine a week. Now, for those that don't know anything about cocaine, and I was doing up to 6 grams a day. So if you don't know anything about cocaine, that's like drinking 8 bottles of wine a day. You know what I mean? Like, I was completely and utterly addicted. And to some extent, Shaun, it was like another demonstration of my relentless standards. Once I got into something, whether it was sport, whether it was education, whether it was working in the city, I can have a ferocious drive about me. And that's where you can see through the achievements. You don't achieve all of that without some focus and determination. And so I dropped 5 stone. I was 15, I'm 14 stone today, 90 kgs, but I got up to, the heaviest I've ever been is about 95 kilograms. I went into rehab at 63 kilograms. I went into rehab at 10 stone. And I was in a physically very, very poor state, mentally shredded, filled with guilt, shame, remorse, and embarrassment, and not caring whether I lived or died. And 4 days into rehab, I was crying my eyes out because I'd lost my way completely. And that person that we've talked about so far in this interview, about all that achievement and, growing up in a small country town, and, I've had quite a robust, interesting, amazing life to some extent, but it had all gone. It had all gone. Everything had gone. All the roles I'd played in my life, rugby player, student, director of a bank, I was nothing more or nothing less than a drug addict. I was just a cocaine addict. And to actually process that mentally was very, very, very difficult. And I'd fallen so far that I was literally swimming in a cesspit of guilt, shame, remorse, embarrassment, self-pity, self-loathing. And it felt like I didn't even have a slither of hope. I thought, I'm going to die. Just to finish that off, I had 6 weeks in rehab. I came out, I relapsed, and I ended up in a hotel for 3 weeks by myself, and I was just heavily using. And I don't know if I was trying to kill myself or it was the last hurrah, the last use up I was ever going to have. But I had this moment. I laid in bed, and one day, and I'll never forget, it was 3:22 a.m. on the clock on the TV. I'd just been to the toilet, and it was 3:22 a.m. and I just laid in this bed, and I just said, mate, your whole life has come to this one moment, right here, right now. And I didn't have 8 choices or 10 choices. I had 2. I either go back to full-on addiction and die. I knew I was going to die because I'm not stupid. You can't put that amount of that substance into your body that regularly and expect to live. That's ridiculous. That's delusional. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to give this recovery a go. Threw myself into Narcotics Anonymous. And, 8.5 years later, a counsellor, a mentor. The greatest gift of my recovery by a million miles is that I am a present and available dad. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to fill that role, that my kids are getting what they deserve, and that's a father who's just doing his best. I'm not brilliant, I'm not amazing, I'm not special, I'm not different, but I'm doing my best on a daily basis. And I'll go, to finish this dialogue off, I'll say to anyone out there, I'm not just talking about addiction, I'm not talking about alcoholism, not just talking about alcoholism. Whatever debilitating issue you have, whatever negative automatic thoughts, or anything that's holding you back, seek help. Seek help, because the worst thing I did was isolate. I thought, because of my ego and my pride, I thought, I can get through this. I can get this done. I've got a law degree. I played for Australia in 20. I've done that. I'll beat addiction. I'll by myself. I'll get it. And that attitude nearly got me. I nearly died. How am I left? Absolutely. There's not enough words in the dictionary to describe my gratitude. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be alive, and I can't tell you how grateful I am to be a present and available father, a productive member of society. I'm clean, I'm sober, I'm healthy, and I spend my life in a worthy cause helping others, which I find incredibly fulfilling. So, 4 days into rehab was probably the lowest point of my life. That and the relapse, when I had the realisation that I'd fallen so far. What am I saying? Recovery is possible. Healing is possible. Why do I say that? I did it. So that's the cocaine story. And I haven't had a sip of alcohol or a sniff of cocaine for 8.5 years. And I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's not a scenario that I personally understand. I hear it a lot. I speak about it a lot, and I've seen it within the hockey community. And there's a lot to kind of decompress throughout that whole process. There's two bits I would love to learn a little bit more about, and one is actually right at the beginning and one is right at the end.
Yes.
What I want to kind of get from this is that anybody that has experienced this, that's listening, or somebody who is listening that knows somebody has experienced it, that they can get the answers that we all ask for. How can we help? How can we see this?
Yes.
And the first bit that really got me actually was right when you started talking is you said you were aware of this downward spiral. You'd use recreational, but it wasn't something that you were ever linked with. And you were on this
Correct.
downward spiral. You were aware of it. And on this one day, this person said, "Would you like one?" And your yes on this podcast was very affirmative. There was no question. Yes, I'm having it. That's how it sounded like it.
Yeah.
And then a little bit after, you said to any, you kind of gave advice and you said, look, to anybody that is going through this, question it. So how come in that moment for yourself, do you find that you weren't able to question it, that it was such an affirmative yes, and there was no pause for thought in that moment for you?
Okay, so I probably hadn't heard a podcast like this. I wasn't aware of what I was getting into. So hopefully one of the benefits of this podcast is I'm saying to people, be aware. So if there's a young person out there who's in their late teens or their 20s or something, look, let's face it, drugs are everywhere, right? If you want them, you'll find them. If you're not looking for it, you won't find it. You might get offered it, but most people say no, and so they should. What I didn't stop in the moment and go, should I take this or not? I'd never had a podcast. I hadn't had a Kent Bray story saying, look, just stop and just be aware of what this substance is. And it is evil. For me, cocaine is evil. Where it took me, it nearly killed me, right? So in answer to your question was, I didn't have the awareness to stop, think reasonably and rationally and just say no. I mean, it's the old, it's one of the, they had a campaign in America many years ago around drugs, is just say no. So I just did not have that awareness at the time to question it. And also, just quickly, when you're in I was at the Harlequins at the time. I was at the toilet at Harlequins, but when you're out at a nightclub and it's going on and the music's there and you're with the so-called beautiful people and someone says, there's that peer group pressure, do you want a line of cocaine? And it's like, you're amped up in the evening and you say yes. Now, most people don't become addicts. What I'm saying to people out there is, there's no guarantee that you won't be the one that does become an addict. And it is, I'm telling you, Shaun, it is the most horrible situation I've ever been in my life, is being beholden to this white substance on a daily basis. It's horrible.
Yeah. Now, you had two moments. You had two moments of realization. One that took you to rehab, and then obviously you had this moment that you spoke about a minute ago. This, I think you said 3:22 in the morning.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about the first one. What was it that led you to reach out to go to rehab? How did that come about? How did you recognize it?
I'm going to have to tell the story. I just hope I don't get emotional because there's this link with rugby. I mentioned a bloke called Troy Coker.
Mm-hmm.
And Troy and I go back to, we were 19 years old and we've been all around the world playing rugby. He's a big dude. He's like 6'6", and, he played for Australia. He won a World Cup with Australia rugby in 1991. And we've been great mates and, not just, load of rugby tours, but socially. We've grown up. We met him at 19 and we are still very, very close today. And 2015 Rugby World Cup, the boys came over from Australia and you know, they saw me. And the first thing they saw me was I looked horrendous. They were like, what's the story? What's going on with you? You look horrendous, you know. And I just minimised it, deflected it, lied. And they saw me going in and out of the toilet all the time. And they knew what I was doing. And I was, you know, showing all the symptoms of what, you know, using cocaine, talking like an AK-47 and jumping all around the place and eyes like dinner plates and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, we were together for a week leading up to the final between Australia and the All Blacks at Twickenham in 2015. And we were walking through South Kensington one night and I was off my head on cocaine. And Troy he's a hard, tough rugby player, right? You know, he is that big rugby playing dude. You would not think that Troy would be overly emotional as such. And we walked through South Kensington, he put his arm around me and he said, the day before, he said, we're going to have an intervention. And I said, I don't want an intervention, I'm fine. And then when we walked through South Ken this night, he put his arm around me and said, mate, you know, we're leaving in a couple of days. Please get professional help. You know, you're in a lot of trouble. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe, like, when I say I couldn't believe it, I was in denial. And what he doesn't know is that I spent the next 5 or 6 months trying to prove him wrong, trying to prove my mate wrong, saying, I can do this, and I brought down all the levels of cocaine. And I was absolutely hell-bent in proving my mate wrong, that I could do it, that I did have it under control. And I went from, you know, a number of grams a day and I got it down to 1 gram a day. And some days I didn't have coke. And then, Shaun, I just had this revelation that I could not stop. I could get it down, but I couldn't stop it. And if I stopped for a day or two, I couldn't stay stopped. So that was the first moment. And that's when I thought, so the first moment, Troy, get help. Second moment, I'll prove you wrong. Third moment, I've got to get to rehab. And rehab, I relapsed, and then the fourth moment was the 3:22 a.m. So I suppose you could look at 4 moments in my life which changed the direction of my life and absolutely filled me with gratitude. I'll tell you a quick story. In 2019 Rugby World Cup, I was in Tokyo with Troy and another guy called Frank Austin, and we were sitting around this table, and I was about 2 years, just over 2 years clean and sober. And the boys were really happy and whatever. And we sat there and I said, guys, I just want to say something. And I absolutely broke down sobbing. I was crying like a baby. I was absolutely sobbing. And I put this napkin over my eyes, you know, over my face, because I was just sobbing into this napkin. And I heard Troy say, mate, what's up? And I just took the napkin down. I just said, thank you. You know, thank you for you know, not running, you know, thank you for just being there and supportive. And they both said, listen, mate, that's what mates do. But I could present a pretty good case that rugby, mates, saved my life. So I could go back, I could present a pretty good case and thread it back that the sport that gave me so much and took me all around the world and played a part in me getting to Oxford, played a part in me getting into the City of London, also played a part in me turning my life around. So, you know, what am I saying? I mean, how much do I owe rugby? How much do I owe it? You know, because Troy's a rugby guy, and he and Frank Austin, Dirk Hansen, a couple of other guys were instrumental in helping me turn my life around. So, yeah, that's the story.
And that's the community vibe you get with sport. You know, there's just, I was talking to somebody the other day, and there's just something different. Like, you could walk into a room and you could sense potentially another rugby player, and there's just this instant connection, even if you've never met. It's the same for me. You know, the ice hockey boys, we've all been through something that nobody else has experienced, and there's always that togetherness. You know, some people within male sports would call it brotherhood, sisterhood, maybe in film, a female sport, but there's always that something, that little bit extra. And their honesty and the community element of it, that togetherness, it sticks on after sport. It really does. And that's why it's so important to be involved in it, because it is a network that you can often lean on.
Yeah, I think some really interesting words you use there, community. You know, I think community is absolutely key. And obviously, when you're in a rugby, you are in a rugby community. The rugby, I'm sure it's the same as ice hockey. I think when you get into those physical sports, when you are relying on someone else on the field to do their job and you do your job and that sort of stuff, and that loyalty, that commitment, that support of each other, it's almost like we all get home, we all come home alive type thing. I hate sort of bringing in sort of warlike analogies, but because, you know, it's sport, it's not war, but it's that we look out for each other. No one's left alone type stuff, that community, network, rugby, support, club. Now, the opposite of that is where I ended up. I was in a dark place all by myself. At the end, I wasn't using any drugs with anyone. I wasn't going out. I was just sitting at home. So I was isolated. So isolation is very, very bad. You know, a person who's got issues, if they're alone, they're in bad company. So a drug addict alone is in bad company. An alcoholic alone is in bad company. A person who is feeling very low and depressed is in bad company. And as you rightly say, that connection, me and myself and the guys that I played rugby with, especially if you've won something with someone, that connection will stay with you forever. Absolutely. A mateship, a comradeship, a togetherness, a tightness, a connection, and dare I say, a love for each other will stay forever, in my opinion.
And you had this final moment of realization. And what was unique about this is you've gone from getting help and support from others, which they tell you to do. They tell you to talk and gain support in that way. But you then had this moment at 3:22 in the morning. Can you even explain where that came from? Did it come from anything literally, or did it just hit?
I think it's spiritual. They call it a spirit in recovery, in Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, whatever. They call it a spiritual awakening, a revelation, a light bulb moment, an aha moment. But it was definitely spiritual. And I think, Shaun, that deep down in our souls, we don't want to die. You know, we don't want to die. And I think I got to a point where I surrendered. I absolutely gave in and said, right, that's it. We could talk for hours, but there's things around fear and control. I've controlled my whole life. I want to be a rugby player, right? Gym, sprint training, protein shakes because I need to build up, swim a K a day for my shoulders and everything, you know, rehab, recovery, like in injuries. So there was a degree of control. There's control around my, you know, time in the city. But I had to let go and have faith. So in that moment, I believed that I didn't want to die. And I just had a moment of clarity that said, I need to change everything. So yeah, it's called a spiritual awakening. And I had it in that moment. It's crazy. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, things work in mysterious ways. And it's probably that just the evolution of everything coming together at the right time, really. You know, and looking at how the brain works, it's all of this challenging this dark time for you has led you to where you're at now. And you talk quite a lot within your mentoring and the motivational speaking about mentality, sporting mentality, business mentality. Can you tell us about the crossover of that and what's that led you to?
Yeah, okay. So we had a chat just before we started, and I said that when I look back on my rugby career, I missed stuff that I don't think can be replicated. I just don't think those 5 minutes before you go out on a field in rugby, where you're just absolutely heightened physically and mentally, and you're looking around and you're looking into guys' eyes, and there's that, we can do this. It doesn't matter the colour of your skin. It doesn't matter religion. It doesn't matter what school you went to. It doesn't matter whether you're 30-year-olds with 3 kids or you're 18 or 19-year-old and haven't even got a girlfriend. It does not matter. There's this commonality. there's this bond, and it is so deep and meaningful. You've even got your own colours. You know what it's like when you're playing ice hockey. You are one. You've got your colours, you've got your tribe, you've got your community. Everyone's watching, and there's no hiding place in sport. You know, you're out there and you are vulnerable to the public. You make a mistake, everyone sees it. You got to live with it. That sort of stuff. And what I think so when I left sport, there was a bit of a hole that largely got filled by being up in the city. But so some people struggle a lot when their routine, their structure, especially professional athletes, you know, they walk into an office and they go, "We don't want you anymore." Boom, that's it. No more contract. You're like, "See you later." So you're not turning up at the club. You're not turning up the physios. You're not turning up the doctors. You're not turning up. Everything's done for you. You walk around. There's adulation. We love you. We love you. All of a sudden, you go into a job, and if anything, you're probably going to get some resentment because people go, "Oh, what? Because this guy's a bit of a name in the rugby world, we're going to employ him." It's tough. It's not easy. But getting back to your question, I learned a lot from sport that I took into the workplace about resilience, about strength, about you're going to have your bad days, but you will be okay if you get up off the ground, take ownership and move forward. You know, you will get setbacks, but you will overcome those setbacks. Preparation, be prepared. So things about being prepared for, you know, obviously for want of a better word, battle. You know, when I went to work in the city, be prepared, be humble, learn off others, do your role. All those sorts of messages that I got from the sporting world, I took them into the financial world and the workplace. And one thing that was always said to me was, I was just a very good, committed, loyal employee. I worked with everyone, and that all came from my sporting background. So it was, as it turned out, you know, and I would say to people in the sporting world is that you've got a ton of intellectual property. You've got a ton of it around management, mind management, body management, preparation, learning how to win, learning how to lose, working with others, understanding authority, understanding processes, all of that sort of stuff. You've just got to find a place in the working world where you are valued and respected, and you can bring that intellectual property. You find that space, you're going to be successful. That's my experience.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic. You know, sport is fantastic, and it has its downfalls as well when, you know, our relationship with it isn't necessarily healthy. You know, a big reason why I started the podcast, big reason why I wanted you to come and share your story. And there's kind of two questions that have a similar approach here. The first one is, what is the best tip that you could give somebody that is experiencing something that you went through? But also, what tip could you give somebody who knows somebody that is going through it? So, you know, we can kind of get both sides of it here.
Yeah. So if you're going through something around, so let's cut the chase. If it's alcoholism or addiction, catch it early. And when I say catch it early, speak to someone who's armed with the facts, like me. You know, so I work with anyone. Yeah, I've got clients who are like, you know, a surgeon, loads of bankers, lawyers, guy runs a recruitment agency, I work with high achievers, but also work with, you know, people who are just strictly around debilitating issues like grief or low self-confidence, low self-esteem, and addiction and alcoholism. But catch it early, speak to someone, don't isolate, and get educated about what you are involved in. So addiction, I can tell you what's coming down the pipeline. You know, it goes like this: weekend user, I only use on Saturdays, once a month, once a fortnight, once a week. Next minute, Saturday, Sunday. Then it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a progressive illness. So speak to someone who is armed with the facts. If you are the friend of someone, or the mother or father, if you think your son or daughter may have a problem, is speak to them, but and just say exactly what I said. They need to seek professional help. The trouble is when one of the issues is when you love someone and you say to them, I love you, but you know, this drinking and drugging is causing an enormous amount of angst in the household. If they are addicted or they're already an alcoholic, they will minimize it, deflect it. It's a difficult conversation. Again, the answer is professional help, or get to one of the fellowships, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. And when I say get there, the ego and the pride will resist for as long as it can. But it's about being armed with the facts about why you're doing it. Why the need, coping mechanisms, upbringing. Did you grew up in an alcoholic household? Are you using it as a coping mechanism? It's about education about what you are doing. Because if you don't get any education, you don't get any awareness, you don't get armed with the facts around addiction and alcoholism, etc., whatever it may be. All you do is keep repeating the same behaviour. And there's this saying, right? You know it. You know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. No, insanity is doing the same thing over and over, knowing exactly what the result's going to be. That is insanity. Seek help. Seek professional help. Speak to me.
Yeah, there we go. You know, I always say knowledge isn't power. Knowledge times action equals power. So once you have yourself educated, you would then do that next phase of sending Kent a message, Googling a help community online, like implement that education as well.
Correct.
Because knowledge is great. We often know a lot of stuff. I know I should be doing this. How come I'm not? And that's what you have to resolve. That's a massive part of what I do within my behavior changes. I simplify it to the point of somebody taking action, because we love to overwhelm. And when we're not in a good place, like you said earlier, you knew there was a downward spiral, but it was an easy yes. You probably knew at the time, subconsciously, it should have been a no, but there was something that didn't stop you at that phase. And that implementation, that action is incredibly important. Ken, I've got a big question for you here. Now, you expressed that a lot of your upbringing was proving to your parents. Then you mentioned you tried to prove that you could to your best mate.
No, correct.
Are you in a happy place now that you can prove yourself?
Yeah. It's today I don't, to the best of my ability, I'm not defined by certificates or Man of the Match awards or Player of the Year awards. I don't need external validation anymore. I don't need it. You know, who would go onto LinkedIn and just declare, I used to be a drug addict. I did spend £80,000 a year on coke. Who does that? Well, the person that does that is the person that is totally comfortable. That's not me today. I'm totally comfortable with who I am today. That was a version of me, right? But I explain that version so that I can say to people, you can recover. So today I've got nothing to prove to anyone. I don't have anything to prove to anyone. Why? Because I'm happy with who I am today. I don't have to win anything. I don't have to have certificates. I don't have to have cups or medals or whatever to show to anyone. I just show me. I'm genuine, authentic, honest, transparent to the best of my ability. And if someone doesn't like that, that is okay. That's okay. I'm not here to entertain or you know, I'm just me. And it's a great place to be. It's a really, really good place to be. It's very comfortable.
Yeah, and it's a great way to round up this episode as well. Ken, thank you so much for coming on to share your story. Our aim here is just to help one person, and that is all we need to do today. If that person is listening and wants to chat to you, wants to learn more how you can help, where can they find you?
So I've got a website, Kent Bray Counselling and Mentoring. But look, you know, these days you Google my name, everything comes up. I've got other podcasts on Spotify. I've got some stuff on YouTube. But LinkedIn is where I put most of my postings. So you'll find me. As I said, I'm a mentor and a counsellor. I'll just say it costs 100 quid an hour, and I offer a safe, non-judgmental, absolutely non-judgmental, safe, confidential space that someone can just come and unload, unpack, and talk to someone who's not invested in their life. I'm not a family member. I'm not a one of your bosses or whatever. I just give you a space to unload and decompress, and then see where the journey goes from there. That's what I do.
And they can just book one off as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they can just. I don't block book. I say, listen. I say, get one session done and see if you like it. I say to people, ring up 15, 20 minutes. If you're feeling it, let's book a session and then go from there. There's very little pressure. It has to be organic, has to be genuine. It has to be some sort of, my sessions have to be a representation of me. Just transparent, organic, pure, genuine, authentic, and honest. Absolutely honest, being truthful about oneself. As I said, I do more mentoring, with a touch of counselling, but most of my stuff these days is mentoring young men, and very, 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 very fulfilling. I'm so, so grateful. I tell you, I'm so grateful, so thankful.
Yeah. And we're grateful for you being here and being able to share your story and helping other people. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for anybody that has tuned in to today's episode. As I always say, there is no cost to listening, but there is a fee. If you've taken anything away, please share the episode. Send it to somebody direct who needs to hear this. Add it to your story. You never know who needs to hear this story today. So thank you, everybody. And as I love to remind you all, there is always another game. Take care, everyone.